All right. According to StreamYard, we are live. Bienvenidos. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Of course, yeah. I feel like
So
we've been friends for a long time now, so
I've been
it's
looking
not
up
the
to you
first
for a
time.
long time. I'll tell you that.
I'll stop.
So, oh no, no, I seriously. Well, no, I'll skip that for later. The thing that I'm really interested in about like right off the bat is how are you holding up? Because this is like the end of this first part of the
Oh,
journey that you've put together, and like, are you okay? The stress of launching a book, much less the third part and the conclusion of a trilogy, like how are you holding it together?
whew, yeah. Well, if you would have asked me a month ago, I would have said not well. And that was the point where I was really like in crunch mode, and I had the physical arcs all put together and shipping off to people. The book itself was with my copy editor, and so I was waiting for that to come back so that I could tweak it so that I could send it with e-arcs. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I've at that point only I think four other people had read the book, so I have a little beta reader crew,
Right.
and I mean they had a bunch of feedback, and I made a bunch of changes based on their feedback, and then that was it. I was like, I think the feedback was good and I addressed things, but now I'm sending it out to real people who are not my friends. So I was like, oh my gosh, and it's the last book in the series, and I think honestly, like what made it even harder was the surprisingly, overwhelmingly positive reception of Stones of Light,
Yeah.
book two. Because book one, like, there's a lot of people who like it, but it's like there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, it's just meh, and I'm like, yeah, there's some issues with it, I get it, but then like everybody likes Stones of Light, and then I was like, oh no, now their
Oh
expectations
no.
are so high, and it's the end of the series, and so oh my god, I just felt like there was just so much kind of writing on it, and but now it's been a month, and I've got a bunch of reviews for the third book, and people like it, and so it just feels like oh, so much relief, and now I'm like, okay, tomorrow release comes, I'm good to go. I don't even care. Like it's good enough. I know that at least.
So like after tomorrow and the book goes out and everything's fine and there's no weird errors, like are you going on vacation? Are you just going about your normal day? Like how
Yeah,
are you going to celebrate getting across the finish line?
I should probably do something. Yeah, that's a.
I can
I mean,
send
I
you
got
pizza.
I got my day job, so I guess we're kind of doing a celebration. So I am flying to London for work in September.
That'll work.
Convenient. I may have helped make this trip happen, and so I convinced my wife to come along, and so we're going to be going there in September, in time for FantasyCon actually. So we're going to
Yeah.
stop by, and I'm going to be on a panel while I'm there.
Oh, that's
I'm going to hang out with the Broken Binding folks, and yeah, it should be a lot of fun. So that'll be my reward for being done.
and done.
Yes.
So, like, what are the emotions at this point? Are you relieved to, be across the finish line? Is there a sense of remorse and regret at kind of leaving it behind? What are you feeling right now?
Oh man, mostly relief. I mean, there's also this weird sense of like this is something that I spent the last 5 years thinking about and working on, and when you're not a full-time author, it's a lot of work outside of your regular day job. And so the amount of effort put into this to have it like finally conclude, oh, it feels real good. And I'm as much as I have enjoyed writing this series, I'm excited to get to the next thing as well. So
Right. It's kind of nice to be able to put it to bed finally.
yes, and I've had people ask if I'm going to be doing any novellas or anything in the Threadlight world, and I don't have any on the immediate docket. I'm ready to like be done with it for now, and it's very very common, right, for like having like a prequel novella or things like that.
Sure.
Uh, I have a couple ideas jotted down that I've had over the last 2 years. One of them I actually wrote two chapters for, so I might come back to it someday. But for now, I'm full steam ahead on what's next. So
So, like, from your perspective, what's the big difference between releasing the first book and then the second book? And then the third book, do they all have the same level of terror that's associated with them, or are they completely different emotions for each?
They're different for each. Yeah.
Okay.
The first one is scary because I mean, you're making all of the decisions right there, right? And so like the first draft of Voice of War was very different from the final draft of Voice of War because it could be, right? But then after that book is done for the next book, there's a lot of things that are already set in stone that you can't go back and change. There are things that I would love to go back and change in Voice of War at this point, but it's too late.
Thank God they don't let you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm an indie author. I could, right? Just go tweak it. No one will know.
Right.
But yeah, so like the first book, I think, at least for me, is definitely like the scariest. I think the benefit there is that, at least for me, I had no plans of having this many people read my books. When I wrote Voice of War, it was purely like for fun. I mean, I like doing things well, so I wanted to make it good, and that's why I went through like multiple rounds of editing and things like that. But I had absolutely no marketing plan. Didn't know any bloggers. I didn't even know, like, I wasn't even part of the community really. Like, I just read by myself at my house. Like that was my reading community. Like me and Hillary just hanging out on the couch reading books. And so when I published the book, like I originally planned to publish it in April of 2020, and then I published it in March of 2020 because I was like, oh, pandemic hit, like we're all quarantined, like let's just publish early. And that's terrible, like marketing. Like, that's not a good idea. I had like, 20 people or something that like had pre-ordered it, and they were all just like friends and family and like my mom's friends and stuff like that. And yeah, the only, like, the real thing that kind of took it beyond that in the first place was SPFBO. That's when I realized like how big the community was, and how like exciting indie publishing is in general. So that was kind of from there. But back to the question. So book one is scary because you got to make all these decisions. Book two is scary because book two, I guess, is only as scary as the success of book one.
Okay. What level am I being held to?
Yeah, right. Like, what are people's expectations going into the next book? So I think book two, at least for me, book two was nice. Like, I really enjoyed writing it. It flowed really, really nicely. It was definitely the easiest of the three books to write.
Well, and then Stones of Light, you set your release date before the book was ever done, right?
Yeah. I did that for Bonds of Chaos too. Yeah, Bonds of Chaos.
I said, don't you?
It's I like to have a little bit of pressure, and I handle pressure well. So sometimes I just have to put it on myself. Yeah, I put the Bonds of Chaos pre-order up for August back in like October or November, I think. Oh, wow. So it was a long time ago, and I was probably like 20% done with the book at that point. I was like, August? That's so far away. Like, easy. I got this. And then it turned out I got really busy at work for like 3 or 4 months after that, and I did a lot of writing in May and June.
I want to talk about work real quick. So I correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you've worked for Facebook and PlayStation as an engineer. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in my experience, engineers are notoriously horrible storytellers. How do you put those two halves of your brain together to make this guy that can be an engineer and can tell these amazing, wonderful, fantastical stories?
So first off, I'm seeing some people are saying that YouTube chat is disabled. I don't know if it's too late for us to fix that.
Okay.
It'd be fun to see their comments. But that's kind of, it's a little bit of a tricky answer, because I think the idea of what a typical software engineer has changed dramatically over the last, especially I would say 10 to 15 years. And so a lot of people that I work with are wildly creative people. Some of them have like really cool hobbies on the side. Like one of my coworkers right now, he does stage lighting in his spare time. So like I just went to a play this weekend that he did all of the lighting for, and he like has, 50 different lights that are all programmed and like robotic, like moving around, and he has it all in control. And it's really, really cool. So, I think there's a much bigger range of like who is in the software engineering field now. And yeah, so there's other people I know in the indie community who are also software engineers, and we've talked about it as well. And I think it's, yeah, definitely getting a little bit more common.
Yeah, it's amazing to me because that's very much definitely, left brain, right brain. And people that are able to kind of fuse those two things together are just amazing to me. It's like you've surmounted two hurdles at the same time. I think that's incredible. So with you as a kid, who were you when you were 10 and 13 years old? And what did that guy look like? And how did that guy get into writing and storytelling?
I was a goober. That's who I was. I was just a little goober. Uh, I mean, I honestly, my entire life, I've just loved to do everything. And so I've kind of done a lot of everything. I did all of the different sports in junior high and high school. I have a varsity letter in track and tennis and wrestling. I did football and basketball, and I played soccer for a long time. I'm coaching my son's soccer team right now. Outside of sports, like I actually I was the first place in speech and debate for humorous interpretation
Really?
when I was in high school.
That's a tough bar.
So that was fun. For those who aren't familiar with speech and debate, like there's like the debate side, but then there's the speech side, which is like you memorize an 8-minute like monologue,
Yeah.
and then you just deliver it like a bunch of different voices, like you're playing all of the characters. So it's kind of like an audiobook kind of thing, which Andy, you'd be so good at that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I just tried a bunch of different things. I was in musical theater in high school. I was Gaston in Beauty and the Beast. It was so fun. So like
That's a great
I
musical
kind of just did
number.
everything. Yeah. Oh my gosh, the musical has even better songs than the Disney version.
That's got to be fun to belt out "No One Fights Like Gaston."
Oh yeah, and my very best friend was LeFou, so we had a blast. It was fun. But yeah, I just really enjoyed kind of doing everything, and even like on the music side, I played a bunch of music growing up. I was in like a little band. I did a lot of songwriting, and always enjoyed writing, but usually in the short form. Like I grew up writing a lot of poetry, which turned into a lot of songwriting. And so when I was in college, I did a lot of like open mic nights and like competitions and things like that.
Oh, wow.
Um,
So
and
you're really kind of a polymath renaissance man.
I just like, this is what I tell people. There are few things that I'm exceptional at, and a lot of things that I'm good at. And so I don't know if it's better to be exceptional at a few things or good at a lot, but I feel like I'm decent at most things, and I really like trying new things.
So you've said that your biggest influences are probably Sanderson and Weeks, and then maybe to a lesser extent, kind of Hobbes and Abercrombie. Those are the writers. Was there someone that was in your life that encouraged you to become a novelist or start writing? Was there a teacher or was there a family member that kind of came alongside you and gave you the kind of support and encouragement that you needed early on?
Ooh, for the novelist side,
Sure.
not really.
Oh,
In high school, I was actually like the TV anchorman for our school. So another random thing that I did. There's a lot of random things that I did in life.
you've got built-in storytelling.
And so I say that because my freshman year of college, I was actually studying broadcast journalism, and my plan was to become a journalist and then to become a TV anchorman. That's what I wanted to do, and ended up not going that path, obviously. But I did a lot of writing kind of in that process. But from the novelist side, I would say probably about 10 years ago, I started playing around with the idea. So my wife and I have been married for 11 years now, as
Mhm.
of about 2 weeks ago. And
Congratulations. That's great.
yeah, so me and Hillary, we share a lot of kind of similar hobbies. We have been reading the same books for a long, long time, and we both had like ideas for stories. So Hillary, she will never talk about this, but she has like a YA epic fantasy kind of story that she like plotted out when she was younger, and maybe someday she will get around to it, but
So we all
probably
need
probably
to
a ways away.
encourage her to put pen to
Well, she's got all
paper.
the characters. She's got like all of the plot. She's got the world. It's all just sitting there. But she's got like a lot of things on her plate too, especially with like all of the YouTube things. So for
So
now, it's definitely on the back burner. But she definitely encouraged me a lot as I got started.
so let's talk about character for a second. You've got three really ridiculously compelling characters coming from three entirely different points of view. And the starter on that is, just as a beginner, is, are any of them based in any way on people in your life? Are they created from whole cloth?
They are not based on anyone in real life. I'm sure they are influenced by people. No one like directly that I'm like, okay, this is the person that I want them to be like. Um, I would say probably the one that is the most influenced is probably Chris. I see a lot of myself in Chris,
Mm-hmm.
just as like the father of a young child, and you know, struggling to make sure he wants to be the best dad he can be, but then feeling like he's failing a lot, and then actually failing a lot.
Then actually failing a lot, yeah.
But yeah, the idea was I really wanted to have like some diverse perspectives, which is interesting because I think that's actually one of the hard parts about doing like epic fantasy like this. And I see the same thing in a lot of comments about Stormlight Archive actually,
Yeah.
is readers latch on to like usually one character that they really, really like. And then the other, like maybe there's other ones like, oh, they're fine. And then maybe there's one they don't like. And so that's been kind of like the most interesting thing of seeing people's reviews is there are people who just love Laurel
Yeah.
in book one. And there are other people who just hate Laurel in book one. And they're like, she is just the most annoying character in the world. Oh my gosh. Like if he wanted to write someone annoying, he did it. And other people are like, oh, she's so realistic. She's so great. And I'm like, well, she is,
Different strokes.
teenage girl. So,
Well, and one of the
yeah.
things that I really like is that each of these characters is kind of defined by their interior struggles, more so than the forces that are aligned against them from an exterior perspective. So let's start with Chris real quick. What kind of sums up Chris's struggle for you?
Chris just feels like he's never good enough. And part of it's because he was, thrown into this role that he knows he was undeserving of at the time. He became a high general when he was young because of things that he technically did not do himself. And I think like imposter syndrome is like a lot of what he goes through, both in his work life and in his home life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, his first experience with his newborn son is not great. And I just like that moment like broke my heart writing it. I was just like, oh my gosh, I would just hate to be this guy right now. Oh man. But at the same time, like he is doing what he has to do, but he's like missing this moment. And yeah, so that's probably his biggest defining characteristic is that feeling of never being good enough for the people that he loves.
Well, and by the way, that opening still breaks me. I was just like, oh, here's a recommendation. Cool, I'll read. I'm like, 10, 15 pages in. I'm like, this is horrible. What happened? So,
Oh, yeah.
You got me straight off the bat with the introduction. So thank you for that.
I have mixed feelings about that now because I still love that opening chapter with that rite of revelation.
Yeah.
But it's also pretty dark.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who drop the book after the first chapter because they're like, this is too dark for me. It can only go downhill from there. But like in reality, like that's probably one of the darkest parts of the book.
Absolutely.
And so part of me wishes that like I had better set people's expectations for the rest of the book. But there's also a lot of people who are just like, oh, this is so compelling. It's just I read that and I was like, I was all in.
Yeah,
So.
Absolutely. That was me. I was just like, I'm absolutely all in. How could he do this? Who is this guy? Where's he going with this story? And the other thing that I've always said is with Chris, you've got the best stakes ever. So, I am fully invested from Chris right off the bat, but that's just me. Laurel, let's talk about her internal struggle and what that looks like for you, because it's a little bit more complex.
Yeah, Laurel has a couple things going on, right? She lost her parents just a few years before the book starts, and so she's a teenager who's getting raised by her grandpa, and she's like pretty rebellious, I guess, right in a sense. She has high expectations for herself, which she, feels bad about when she knows she breaks them. But at the same time, like she's got this side of her that wants to be really adventurous. So it's hard for her to kind of manage both of those, where she wants to be responsible, but she also wants to be adventurous. And there's that. And then on top of that, there is this growing, especially in book one, this growing addiction to her magic. And that kind of feeds both sides and kind of throws her in some situations.
I'm very curious about why you decided to explore that. I think it's fascinating. I don't think I've ever seen it done before, where you're kind of comparing magic use to drug addiction, and it rings so well. Where did that come from? How did it start? What did that look like in its genesis phase?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was an idea that I had, and then while building out the magic system and trying to decide like how I wanted to, do reveals for the magic system as well, it was really like, okay, Sanderson always talks about when you make a magic system, you got to talk about what are the downsides to it too. And I was like, well, I had this idea of like, magic being addicting or addictive, and I feel like in reality, if magic were real, people would definitely be addicted to it. Whether there was like a physical addiction or just like, a societal or, whatever it is, there's going to be some kind of addiction to having power just in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to make it less, nebulous and more actually like fixed. Like this is a real thing, especially as like, Threadlight runs through your veins. It's like it feels almost like a drug, like getting poured through you.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's magnificent, and that's part of the reason that I enjoy her story so much. Then we come to Alvarax. That internal struggle is absolutely fascinating to me. I love the way that part of it plays out in book two. I don't want to do too many spoilers. Although I do want to ask about something later. But like, where do Alvarax's internal struggles come from?
First of all, I want to say like Alvarax is my favorite because he brings like this like quirky side to the story that is not there in the first half of Voice of War. And it's also like he's such like a weird character because I just like he's just thrown in there. And there's reasons why I introduce him halfway through, but it's also like weird that you introduce a new important character halfway through. And so there's people who get to him and are just like annoyed. And they're just like, I don't like this.
This guy.
Like, get me back to Laurel and Chris. And there's other people who are like, this guy's hilarious. I like this guy. And so I feel like the people who like Alvarax in Voice of War are the people who enjoy Voice of War the most. Because if you don't enjoy him, then the back half feels a little funky. And it is a little funky, frankly. If the book were traditionally published, that would probably get changed, I imagine. But Alvarax himself, he's the son of a thief. He lives in this kind of like rebel city in the desert where there's a lot of, sketchy things that go on. There's,
Picturing
of drugs. There's drugs going on. There's basically like races on these giant snakes. Which again, like I can't remember where that came from, but it's weird.
It's cool.
It's fun. Yeah. And he's got this grudge with this guy, and he's also young. Like Alvarax is 19 years old, and I think there are people who think he's older at first and get confused because he definitely acts young, and even some of like his responses to things are pretty young. Where like the way he talks about Jellium, who is the baron basically of this rebel city, the one who is responsible for his father's death, and he like keeps calling him fat and like makes fat jokes about him, and it's pretty immature, frankly. And Alvarax gets called out on it in book 2, which was a very fun scene for me to write.
Yeah.
Alvarax is he just really wants to move past this shadow that he feels like his father left on him. Right? Like he feels like he's always just seen as like kind of the screw up son of a thief.
Yeah.
And so he wants to be better.
What's great, part of what I love about all of them is that they have such disparate struggles that are interior, but all of them are kind of about the difference between who they are and who they're supposed to be, or how they view the way that they're supposed to be. And I love that theme kind of ties all of them together. There was a thing that you said in an interview once, and I want to quote you here.
Uh-oh.
You said that the parts of ourselves that we hold most dear certainly influence all aspects of our lives. However, fantasy worlds are not real. And the truths we hold dear in this world don't necessarily have to extend to the other. What I find most interesting about fantasy is the chance that we have to diverge from our world and explore an alternative. Would you mind talking about that idea for just a moment?
Yeah. I think so. This partly came up because there are so many conversations, especially nowadays, talking about authors' personal beliefs and how they bleed into their writing. And there's definitely some of that. But I think what's really cool is that when you write these secondary worlds, it's also an opportunity for authors to explore alternative beliefs for themselves. And there's actually like in Bonds of Chaos, there's a whole like kind of religious arc that is kind of interesting. But yeah, it's kind of this idea that like as a writer, I get to put myself in the shoes of people who I don't agree with, but I need to understand them. And I think that's really interesting. And it obviously like there's a bunch of killing in fantasy books, and I don't think any authors, are going to go out saying that they approve of murder, and yet we keep writing it as if it's normal. Yeah, so it's just this idea.
There's quite a bit of Christ-like imagery in the second book.
Alvarax, yeah.
Yeah, with Alvarax. I mean, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but if you've read the book, you know the scene. And oh boy, the mechanics of how you put that together were beautiful. And then the way that scene concludes and the thing that is said that brings that to a close, I just thought was really resonant and powerful. I mean, that was some of the strongest religious allegory I've seen in a book in forever. So I just thought it was really interesting, you being able to bring that in.
Yeah, I mean, in my personal life, I'm very religious, and so I spend a lot of my time doing that. But at the same time, like I realize that there are a lot of people who aren't, and I'm not gonna, force my opinions on them. And so I would rather take the parts of my religious life that are generally applicable, right? Like these themes of like redemption and things like that, and explore those. And so even like this religious arc that I mentioned in book 3, there's a character who is basically like a zealot, and it goes through his kind of back and forth, kind of figuring out how he balances his zealotry with kind of reality. And I think both for people who are religious and people who aren't religious, I think I wrote it in a way that like both of them can see it and be like, I get it, and I like it.
Yeah,
I was kind of trying to represent all sides.
Well, and speaking of redemption, there's a quote from Voice of War that goes, redemption isn't something that can be obtained or withheld. It's a commitment that you make. And again, there's a truth that resonates there. Is the idea of redemption, how important and why was it important for you to explore it through these works?
I think maybe it's because I made so many dumb choices when I was young. I don't know. No, I think it's just something that's universally like relatable, right? Like we all make mistakes, and we all have moments, big or small, where we feel the need to redeem ourselves from something that we've done, right? I think Chris and Laurel both feel the need to redeem themselves, and Alvarax kind of in the same way, but I guess they all have in their own different ways are trying to redeem themselves. So.
Yeah, and I'll skip the rest of that. Everybody needs to read the book so you can know what we're talking about there. But I think it's so well explored and deep without being pushy. And, I feel like I get a deep dive into it, and I'm looking forward to Bonds of Chaos so much to see how it all plays out. But it's just so well crafted. It's a lot of fun to watch. Another theme that you explore quite a bit is family. And what's really interesting about these books is that it's not a found family. You do something that's very, very rare, at least in fantasy books, which is this is your actual family, right? Because in fantasy stories, usually you take the original family and you leave them and you go on the hero's journey. But what you've done is weaved the idea of family into the story where it's a dad and it's a mom and it's a kid and this community that's a real family and the real actual responsibilities that go along with that. The relationships aren't perfect, but they're healthy. And it's like this, it's this.
That was the key. That's what I wanted to show. I was
Okay,
like,
so
in
talk more about
this
that.
crazy world, I want to show some healthy relationships. They're not perfect. There are moments, like for Chris and Ariel, for example, there are definitely moments where they get real mad at each other. And there's also moments where they like break down with each other and support each other like very, very deeply. And I think that's healthy, right? It's healthy
Absolutely.
to like there's gonna be issues, but at the end of the day, like as long as you're supporting each other and kind of all in. Like I really didn't want to write the story where like, there's marital conflict
Sure.
where you like maybe they're gonna break up. Like no, these people are solid. Like Chris and Ariel love each other
Yeah.
for the entire series, and they've got each other's back, but they don't always do it the right way, and so there are struggles there.
Well, and one, it's different, but two, it's positive and encouraging and uplifting. And I'm not going to say you don't get enough of that in a lot of fantasy, but it's a rare thing to come across. And I think that's one of the reasons that the story stands out to me is that it has this baseline of positivity that is just woven into every thread in the book that really resonates. And I think it's a tough putt because it's difficult to show a family because it's a little bit inherently boring when they're healthy. It's so much easier to go after the things that are wrong. And what you do is you ring the bells that are about the positive aspects of those relationships and just do it in this magnificent way that makes you feel so much for
There's enough wrong going on. I don't need my relationships to go wrong too.
Amen, brother. Amen. So that's one of the things that really I just absolutely love. Some of the questions in the OAs, and I'm sorry we don't have comments open, and I'm not going to try and fix that on the fly. But some of the questions that they had in the Oasis were about writing, and I know you've probably addressed these a lot. So I just want to brush by them really quickly. If you had one piece of advice from a creative perspective for somebody who was new to writing, who was looking at tackling their first book, what would that piece of advice look like?
Oh, I mean, my advice is the same as a lot of people, which is you just got to write the first book. Like I mentioned, like the first draft of Voice of War was quite different than the final draft. For those who have read it, here's an example. There was no apogee in Voice of War originally in the first draft, which obviously changes the entire story when you introduce that.
Yeah.
But it never would have happened if I had not written that first draft. And
Right.
so you just got to go through. It's not going to be good. I mean, maybe it will be. Like, there are people who make a good story the first time,
Sure.
but and also I would add on top of that. So write it and then keep going. I actually when I had that first version, I shared it with a group of friends, and one of them was this guy who actually had like been nominated for a Hugo Award for a short story like 20 years ago or something. And he read the first draft of Voice of War, and he told me to scrap it and to start fresh on something new. He was like, "There's enough problems here that like you should just scrap it and it's a good first job. Work on the next thing." And I was like, "I am too stubborn for that. I have ideas how to fix it, and so it will be fixed."
It's that kind of challenge of, oh, it's not good enough. I'm going to show you.
Yeah, it totally is. Yeah.
It's good motivation.
I don't like failing. And so when someone says, you failed, I'm like, "No, I didn't.
I'm just
I'll
not
show you."
which is the great thing about going back and redrafting. So the other question that they had a lot was from the business side. If somebody's looking to self-publish, what's the one piece of advice that you give them from the business side?
Oh gosh, the one piece of advice on the business side. Oh,
Don't launch like Voice of War.
yes, that is correct. And honestly, like part of the reason you don't want to do that is because like the Amazon algorithm like penalizes you for it, right?
Mhm.
Like once your book is out there and it's not selling because you haven't done any ads or any, have no marketing set up for it, then Amazon's like, "Oh, great, that one's not good. Move on. Check the next book." Like it doesn't
Right.
care. It's just a robot. Yeah. So have a plan, I guess, is the main advice. Your plan can
Have
be
a
different
plan
from
and
other
push
people.
hard.
But have a plan. Yeah. Talk to Andy, dude. Man, the release of your book, I think you've done an incredible job, like building a community around that. So I think you've got a
Thank you
good
so
example of
much.
what
But
to
we're
do.
not here to talk about that. One of the other things that I heard a lot was actually addressed in a quote that you had earlier, and I want to read that one for you now. It's what we do. We compare ourselves to others for better or for worse, usually worse. It can be healthy in small amounts, learning how to help us grow. But I think most of us struggle to maintain the healthy level of comparison. So we end up feeling like failures and imposters. How does that statement become true in your actual life? Because you have to go back and forth between confidence and, oh, what am I even doing? So how does that resonate in you? How do you keep your chin up every day and keep going out there and say, okay, I'm ready for round 3?
I think part of it's just being stubborn. If you believe in what you're writing, then you're gonna take it a little bit less personally. That said, like it's impossible not to. You're gonna get reviews that just like wreck your soul. There was a review I got during SPFBO when I was a finalist that just like, oh, and it was mean. It was a mean review. Like the how it was worded was mean. It was actually it actually caused like a big stir. There was people and there was like a big like Twitter debate about it and things. And I just like, kind of like wiped my hands. I was like, I'm not going to talk about it. Like, this is like reviewers are allowed to write whatever they want to write. And so if it's mean, it's mean, at least it's honest. So yeah, you're going to get bad reviews. I mean, it never stops, honestly. Like you just got to hold on and clutch to the wins that you have. I'll give you one tip. If you get good reviews, keep them in a doc. Just keep a like Google Doc of reviews that you've read that just make you feel good. Because sometimes you just need to read those and be like, all right, there are people who love this, and that feels good. Because you're always going to compare yourself to people like, yesterday Ryan Cahill gets his agent, and how come I don't have an agent? Oh yeah, I haven't really sent any queries, so
I haven't done anything
probably not.
that.
But comparing myself. So it's impossible. Yeah, you're always going to compare yourself to people. So
And I
find a
feel
way
like
to clutch onto the good.
people always compare up. They never compare down.
Yeah, right.
I feel like that's the trap. Is you're always, well, I want to be there. Well, you forgot about where you could be or where you were. And I feel like that's important. And your tenacity. I think part of your character and the idea of you refusing to take a loss. You're Spider-Man, right? You get beaten down and you get back up. Spider-Man, get back up. And it doesn't matter how many dings you take. You got a Hugo Award winner say, nah, maybe scrap it and move on to something else. You're like, no, man, I'm not going to do that. And I think that built in, you have that core of steel that refuses to bend or break. And I think that's incredibly helpful.
Andy, you sound like Laurel in chapter 2 of Bonds of Chaos, by the way.
Good.
So you know.
I would gladly sound like Laurel. Except for the whole drug addiction thing. I'll skip that.
Hopefully.
So you know that I'm absolutely nuts for the giant gorillas. Where did these come from? Was there just like, oh, I'm watching King Kong or Mighty Joe Young? or were they devised out of whole cloth? Because nobody did that. Nobody's done that. Where did these come from?
Yeah, so it came twofold. So first off, when I was kind of designing the Wastelander area, I really wanted there to be like a swampy area. And so I was like, okay, what could this look like? And started thinking, different, creatures and things that could be there. And then the part that came after that was Pinterest. So here is a secret weapon for any authors or wannabe authors listening. Pinterest is so good for inspiration. And especially guys are like scared to go on Pinterest.
Sure.
And I mean, maybe I'm not because I used to work there. Before I worked there, I had never used Pinterest.
You're secure in your masculinity. It's okay.
Yeah, and so then I went and worked there, and I love Pinterest. I've got secret boards that I can show you for the Threadlight series. I've got like character inspiration images for each of the individuals, which actually ended up being very nice that I could use those images to show my cover artist when I was putting together those. Be like, hey, this is kind of what this person looks like. But yeah, sometimes I'll just like go in, like look at fantasy creatures and be like, oh, this would be really interesting. Or I could like, take this one and tweak it in this way to make it kind of fit in where I want it to fit in. Yeah, so Pinterest is awesome. So, I have a Pinterest board already for my next series. It's got a bunch of cool stuff in it. I've already got my character images for the main cast.
Ooh, okay, we're going to get to that one in a second. The other thing that I want to talk about, I want you to talk about, is about 6 months ago, you did something jaw-dropping for the indie community. And do you want to talk about this real quick and where it came from? Because this is an act of generosity unlike anything I've seen.
So you're talking about the Indie Fantasy Fund, I assume. So the Indie Fantasy Fund, for those who don't know, my wife and I put together a fund that's basically 5 grants of $1,000 each to 5 different indie authors. And essentially it came from kind of 2 places. One, I feel very blessed in my day job. We make more money than we deserve to make for what I do, I feel like. And so we always are looking for ways to, help people kind of however we can. And now that we're part of the indie community, we were like, hey, let's try to do that. Because sometimes I'll get like a bonus or something. I'm like, okay, let's take some of this bonus and donate it here or there. And so for this, it started out, we were like, let's do like 2. And then we were like, well, there's probably going to be a lot of people who need help. And so it kind of grew. And then it ended up being 6 after the fact because there was just too many good ones.
Wow.
But yeah, it was really just like the cost of successfully indie publishing. I'm sure even like shipping costs. Holy moly. I went and shipped $240 of books a couple days ago because people wanted to buy signed books. And that's a lot of money to just be like, all right, let me just do $240 on my card here, I guess, to ship all these books. A lot of people don't have that. I mean, most indie authors are making, a couple dollars a day in reality.
Oh yeah. It's not like there's money to be had.
Yeah. And so there are few who make a lot, but the majority, I would say probably like 95% of indie authors, at least in like the fantasy world, are making a couple dollars a day.
Yep.
Some less, honestly. Yep. And so like the funding of making it work is just like, it's really hard. Yeah. And so I'm lucky, like I was able to afford, good cover art. I was able to afford a fantastic narrator. We're not all talented like Andy can do our own narration. But like narrators, for example, they're real expensive. And so mine was, I'll give you like numbers. Mine was $250 per finished hour. And Voice of War, I think, was like 13 or 14 hours or something like that, or 12 to 14. I can't remember how many hours it was.
So there goes $3,000.
So you can do the math. Yeah, it's over $3,000, which as an indie author making a couple dollars a day, right? Like, is that worth it? Probably not. Right. And here's the deal: like $250 per finished hour is not that high,
right? For
a lot of these narrators. Like if you're looking at like the top ones are like $400 plus, $400, $600 per finished hour. And so if you want to get like, Travis Baldtree or any of these like really popular people who do indie books, you're going to be spending a lot of money. And my books are short. My
Right.
books are, under 400 pages. So if you have a book that's 600, 700, 800 pages and you're like trying to get a narrator for it and
Have
don't have
fun.
funds, like good luck.
Hope you
So
don't need that car.
even this $1,000 grant is really like not enough. And so, and we know that, and that's why we didn't want to like we're not even going to ask people, right? I have
Sure.
not followed up with anybody that we gave the money to. It's like, this is for you, just to support you however you want.
Right.
Obviously, like you said that you want to use it for these things, and like we support those, but like this is for you. Like do what you want. And so,
Well, and
yeah,
to me, that generosity and that sense of giving really speaks to who you are as a person. And the reason that the Threadlight series is, and I was going over this last night to make sure I was being honest about this, my favorite book and series that I've read of any independent fantasy author is Threadlight. And the reason for it is, quite frankly, your character and where you come from as a person. And I think that positivity and that encouragement is sorely lacking, sorely needed, and something that benefits every single person that reads it. So on behalf of all of us, I just want to say thank you for writing these books, because I think they have a huge positive impact in people's life.
making me feel all warm and fuzzy, man. Stop.
Well, which is immediately followed by, hey, that's great, the book's done, what's next?
Oh, what's next? Yeah. Oh
I'm
man.
bored. Give us more. What's
So if you like married people and family relationships, you're going to be getting more of that in the next series.
okay?
The next series is going to also have 3 main characters, and this time all 3 of them are married. Because I was like, I want to write an epic series where like everyone is married, because no one's ever married, or if they do, like their spouse dies early on or something.
Yeah, you got to get rid of the spouse.
So I'm just like, I'm going to have 3 married couples. There's going to be an older character who's like in his 50s, maybe late 50s probably, and he is a retired warrior. Him and his wife are both retired warriors, and they're going to go on a bit of a John Wick adventure. And the next character is a woman and her wife, and they are so in this world, music is part of like how the magic system works. Well, it's how the magic system works. And so instead of having like tarot card readers or like palm readers, they have people called tone readers. And so this main character, she is a tone reader, and her wife is deaf. And so they are going to go on a heist adventure to steal a magical instrument to heal her dying father. And the third character is pretty grounded in the world itself. So the world here is essentially like there's this, huge continent, and dark creatures came. And so the people with magic in the world created 7 havens. So they ripped out giant chunks of land into the sky. And so there are 7 floating islands, and that's where everyone lives. And 500 years have passed, and they've been living up on these floating islands. And the third character, he is ripped from his family, blamed for a murder, and tossed down onto the ground on the border of the crater of Cloud 7. And so his story will be in a different kind of section of the world.
Okay, and we can all expect that on September 1st.
Hopefully I'll be done with it next year. This one I think I'm going to reach out to some agents about, because I think this one could be really cool. And yeah, I'm still deciding if I want to do that or not, but I might try my hand at querying it out a little bit. So it might be longer for it if I do go that path.
Okay, well, worth the wait, I think, is probably the thing to remember here. And thank you so much. But before we all start jumping into what's next, just thank you so much for Threadlight and putting this together for us and making something fantastic. And I think Dom was the person who kind of originally, like, I'm going to review this book first. And he said, Zack stuck the landing. And I have heard that again and again and again, that exact phrase over and over and over in every review I've read. So I don't want expectations to be too high, but boy, am I looking forward to starting it tomorrow.
Honestly, I was worried about it, man, because the ending is like, it's pretty chaotic in like how everything comes together. And there's like, yeah, it's bittersweet. I'll say that. It's a bittersweet ending.
Well, everybody who has not already gone out and pre-ordered the book, please go and do so now. Get on Amazon, get your order in, get reading on this thing, because I don't think I've been looking forward to a release this much in 3 or 4 years. So everybody, please get on that toot sweet so we can all talk about it. So I am interested in closing things out with 2 minutes with Zack Argyle. Are you interested in doing a speed round, sir?
Let's do it.
All right, we will go with 2 minutes with Zack Argyle starting now. If you were a thread weaver, which power would you pick?
Oh, I'd probably do Sapphire. Oh, yeah, probably Sapphire.
And why?
Well, first off, I got the blue eyes, so it's fitting. And being able to jump off of a building and land without dying, I think, will be awesome.
So for the people that have not read Voice of War and they're thinking about starting it, I don't really know, what is the reason that someone should crack the cover on this book? If there's one reason for them to open it up, what do you expect for them to find inside for them?
Fast-paced fantasy that's PG-13. There's not a lot of adult fantasy that stays in the PG-13 realm. And yeah, I think that the family relationships and bonds there are kind of what really set it apart. So,
all right, if there was one thing that people would never guess about you, what would it be?
Oh gosh, my front tooth is fake. There's my quick answer.
Let's see. If you had to describe the perfect reader for the Threadlight series, who would they be? What would be the thing that they love?
Perfect reader would be Trin.
Trin, very nice. All right. You're not wrong. If someone is coming out of the bonds of chaos and completing the story, the moment they close the book, what are the emotions that you are hoping that they're feeling?
Oh, I want a mix of, I guess after the very last chapter, I want them to feel relief, kind of like, okay, yeah, relief.
Fantastic. And then rumor has it you can balance anything on your face. Can you do it now? Oh, I'm so sorry. We're out of time.